They told me never to speak of what was found in that barn, not because it was evil, but because it proved something they've spent centuries trying to bury. Listen carefully, because once you hear this, you'll never see the world the same again. It was the summer of 1841, in a quiet corner of Ohio, where the soil was rich, the air was thick, and the screams of the enslaved never carried far enough to matter. The plantation belonged to a man named Silas Merrin, a merchant in cotton, flesh, and fear. He wasn't known for mercy, but what he did one August night would turn his land into legend, and his family into a curse whispered for generations. Silas had one child, a daughter named Evelyn. Obese, withdrawn, and locked away from the world, she was treated like an embarrassment, until she became something worse. That summer, her father gave her to one of his strongest slaves, a man known only as Isaiah. No one knows why. Some say Silas was trying to humiliate her. Others say he wanted to prove a point about purity. But what happened next didn't follow human law. 9 months later, Evelyn gave birth. Not to one, not two, but 3. Triplets, each identical, yet different in ways no science, not even now, can explain. Their eyes opened too soon. Their bones hardened too fast. And the midwife who delivered them claimed they whispered before they cried. By dawn, the midwife was gone. The mother was silent, and the triplets were found hours later in the barn, breathing, but untouched by warmth or blood. Every record of that night was destroyed. Every witness silenced. Yet some say when they opened the barn doors, the air inside felt charged, like a storm trapped in wood. And the smell wasn't of decay. It was of iron. Now listen closely, because the truth about what those children became isn't just a story about the past, it's a warning. Warning for anyone who still believes that what's buried stays dead. They brought the children to a man named Dr. Abel Cartwright, a physician who served the Merrin estate for over a decade. He had seen deformities before, sickness, plague, but nothing like this. When he entered the barn, he found the triplets wrapped in linen soaked with something that looked like milk, but carried the scent of metal. Their eyes followed him before he even stepped close, and when he reached for the smallest one, its lips moved. No sound came, only the breath of words unspoken. Cartwright demanded the father stay outside, but Silas refused. He stood there, arms folded, proud and defiant, as if what he had created through sin was proof of some higher calling. He said to the doctor, "You call this nature? Then tell me what nature fears of itself." The doctor didn't answer, because the children's pulse was wrong, not fast, not slow, layered, as if 3 rhythms moved beneath their skin, sinking and unsinking like tides under a full moon. Their pupils dilated at the same time, even when the lamp moved between them, and when Cartwright tried to draw blood, the needle blackened. He wrote his findings that night by candlelight, hands shaking. "If this is birth," he wrote, "then something ancient has remembered itself in these bodies." But the next morning, his report was missing. His house ransacked. His servant found dead with his tongue cut out and a mark burned into his chest, a circle with 3 intersecting lines. Silas said nothing. He simply ordered the barn boarded up, the children moved to the old cellar beneath the manor, and the doctor sent away. But Dr. Cartwright didn't leave Ohio. He stayed, hiding in the nearby hills, documenting every whisper that came from that land. And then, the sightings began. Locals swore they saw shadows moving through the cornfields long after sunset, 3 small shapes walking in perfect formation, no sound, no breath, just movement. The slaves refused to go near the cellar. Some said they could hear laughter coming from beneath the floorboards. But it wasn't the laughter of infants, it was knowing, old, patient. What Silas Merrin called a blessing, the town began to call an omen, because whatever those triplets were, they weren't born, they were returned. After the 3rd night, the sounds from beneath the house became impossible to ignore. The boards above the cellar trembled, the lantern swayed though there was no wind, and even the rats abandoned that place. Silas Merrin stopped sleeping. His servants began to leave one by one, whispering that his daughter's ghost had returned for her children. But Evelyn wasn't dead, at least not yet. She was kept in the east wing, sedated with laudanum, her body wasting away while her mind repeated the same 3 words. "They remember me." Silas had grown obsessed. He began visiting the cellar alone, night after night, carrying food he never brought back up. He told the overseer he was educating them. The truth was darker. Silas wanted to understand them, to find out why they moved as one, spoke as one, dreamed as one. When he tried to separate them, the youngest stopped breathing until the others were near again. He began keeping records of their reactions, sounds, patterns, symbols they traced in the dirt. The drawings matched ancient markings found in burial mounds across Ohio, symbols that predated the plantation, predating even the settlers. He showed one to a preacher who came to bless the house. The preacher took one look, turned pale, and said, "Those are not signs of God. They are signatures." Silas asked, "Signatures of what?" The preacher whispered, "Of whatever owned this land before men." That night, Silas locked himself in the cellar with the children. No one saw him until dawn. When he emerged, his hair had gone white. He spoke softly, as if repeating someone else's words. "They don't need the light. They remember where they came from." From that day forward, the plantation changed. Crops failed without reason. Livestock refused to breed. Birds no longer nested in the trees. And Evelyn, once silent, began to laugh whenever the wind came from the cellar door. The slaves called it cursed. The locals called it madness. But the truth was more complex. Because Silas Merrin had begun to worship the triplets. He said they were keys, vessels holding something older than blood, something that wanted to speak through flesh. And all he needed was a way to open them. Weeks passed before anyone saw the preacher again. When he finally returned to the Merrin plantation, it was not as a man of God, but as something hollowed out by what he'd seen. His hands shook as he carried a small leather Bible pressed tight to his chest. He didn't ask for food or water or company. He only asked one question: "Have they spoken yet?" Silas smiled. He led him down to the cellar. The smell hit first, something metallic and sweet, the air heavy like rain before a storm. The boards creaked beneath their boots, but below the sound came another rhythm, a faint breathing that wasn't quite human. The preacher lifted his lantern. What the light touched made his faith fracture. The triplets weren't infants anymore. Weeks had passed, but their bodies had grown as if months had gone by. Their eyes followed the flame, moving perfectly together, no blink, no delay. And carved into the dirt between them was a circle with 3 crosses intertwined. The same mark burned into the dead servant's chest. Silas said, almost proudly, "They dream in the old tongue." The preacher whispered, "You've called something that remembers before heaven did." He opened his Bible, pages trembling, and began to read, but the words twisted in his mouth. The letters blurred. The flame dimmed, and from the far corner of the room came a sound like laughter, dry, thin, layered threefold. The lantern shattered. What happened in the dark, only Silas spoke of. He said the preacher began to convulse, his eyes turning black, his voice splitting into 3. And then silence. When the lamps were relit, the preacher's body lay still, but his lips moved, repeating words Silas didn't understand. He buried the man that night behind the barn, without prayer. But the next morning, the grave was empty. Only the Bible remained, open to a passage that hadn't been there before, blank pages filled with symbols in fresh ink, matching the children's carvings. From that day, Silas sealed the cellar completely. He told his staff the preacher had left. Yet at night, when the wind came from the west, people swore they could hear his voice beneath the earth, praying backward. And Evelyn, still locked in her room, began to speak again. She said the children were hungry, but not for food. The mansion grew silent after the preacher's disappearance. Servants avoided the west wing, pretending not to hear the scratching that came from beneath the floors. Only Evelyn's room showed signs of life, candles burning at all hours, the scent of wax and salt drifting through the hall. Silas forbade anyone to enter, claiming she was recuperating. Yet the doctor who had once treated her received letters written in a trembling hand, each sealed with wax marked by the same 3-crossed circle. Then one night, the door to her room stood open. No one saw her leave. The sheets were untouched, the window still latched, but the air inside pulsed with warmth as if someone had just breathed out. On her writing desk lay a single line, carved deep into the wood. "I'm going to feed them what they've been waiting for." Silas searched the house until dawn. The cellar door remained nailed shut, yet faint sounds rose through the cracks, 3 heartbeats, perfectly timed, and another softer one that seemed to answer them. He called for his men, ordered torches lit, and broke the boards apart. Inside, the stone steps descended into a heat no fire cause. The smell was of earth and rust, and on the lowest stair rested Evelyn's locket. Inside was a curl of her hair and 3 small teeth that didn't belong to her. Silas shouted her name into the dark. Something answered, but it was not her voice. It was 3 tones blended into one, speaking a single word that none of the men understood. Their torches went out at once. When light returned, Evelyn was gone. The cellar stood empty except for the carvings on the walls, now glowing faintly, pulsing like veins. Silas collapsed, whispering that the children had taken her home. That was the night the Merrin plantation truly died. By morning the fields were gray. The livestock lay motionless, eyes open, as if waiting for command. And in the parlor where Silas knelt alone, a new circle had appeared on the floorboards, fresh, wet, perfect. The morning after Evelyn vanished, Silas ordered the cellar sealed again, this time with iron bolts. He told the townsmen that his daughter had been sent away to recover, but the lie wore thin. Strange lights began to rise from the fields at night, bluish orbs that hovered just above the soil before sinking back into the ground. Dogs refused to cross the property line. Even the river beside the plantation turned the color of tarnished copper. Silas withdrew into his study, surrounding himself with old books, volumes on alchemy, resurrection, ancient rites once banned by the church. He believed the triplets were a bridge between worlds, proof that the boundary between life and memory could be opened. Yet the more he studied, the less human he became. Servants said his voice carried an echo, as if another spoke half a second behind him. One by one, workers fled the plantation, leaving the fields to rot. Only a few remained, drawn not by loyalty, but by fear, afraid that leaving might call the darkness after them. And on the 7th night, thunder rolled though the sky was clear. 3 knocks echoed from beneath the cellar floor. When Silas lifted the iron bar, he found the air inside colder than the wind outside. The triplets sat in perfect stillness. Their skin had grown pale as marble, their hair darkened like soot. Behind them, symbols had spread across the walls, spirals and lines that pulsed faintly when touched by lamplight. They spoke for the first time. Not with sound, but through thought, a hum that settled inside Silas's mind, forming words only he could hear. Open the rest. He didn't understand. But that night he dreamed of endless fields buried under water, voices whispering beneath the waves. When he woke, the pages of his journals were filled with the same markings from the cellar. His handwriting, but written while he slept. He began sending letters to scholars in Cincinnati and Philadelphia, seeking any record of mirrored births. Most ignored him. One replied with a warning, "Stop before they remember your name." Autumn arrived early that year. The crops withered to ash, and an unnatural frost crawled across the plantation. A traveling photographer passing through Ohio captured an image of the Merrin estate. When the plate developed, 3 child-shaped silhouettes appeared in the upper window. Though no one had been there, Silas took it as proof that his work was divine. He gathered the few men still loyal to him and began nightly gatherings in the chapel. They chanted fragments from the preacher's ruined Bible, believing the triplets to be messengers. But the voices that answered were not of heaven. They spoke of memory older than the sun, of shapes that fed on faith itself. Soon after, every mirror in the house cracked. Water refused to boil, clocks turned backward, and in the center of the great hall, new writing appeared burned into the wood. "We are almost awake." Rumor spread through the countryside. Families along the river claimed to see children walking the banks after dark, their reflections moving before them instead of after. Fear drove the neighboring farms to abandon their land. Only one man dared enter, the same Dr. Cartwright who had delivered the triplets months before. He found Silas gaunt, eyes hollow, muttering equations no one had written. In his study lay dozens of sketches, 3 circles, always overlapping, always enclosing a black center. "They are doors," Silas whispered. "And she is the key." Cartwright asked who she was. Silas only pointed to the ceiling above, the east wing where Evelyn's room once stood. The doctor heard faint footsteps, the sound of 3 voices humming in perfect unison. He fled that night, leaving behind his notes. The last entry read, "They are not his children. They are the memory of something that used him to return." Winter swallowed the plantation whole. Snow buried the fields, yet the house remained warm from within, glowing with an amber light that pulsed like a heartbeat. No one dared approach, but travelers passing by on the old road said they heard a woman's voice singing lullabies in 3 different tones. Inside, Silas kept watch at the cellar door, waiting for Evelyn. He no longer wrote, no longer ate, only listened. Then, one night, the singing stopped. Silence fell so complete that even the wind refused to move. From the cellar came a sound, a single breath drawn by 3 mouths at once. Silas knelt, pressed his ear to the wood, and whispered, "I'm ready." The bolts slid open on their own. Light spilled upward, not golden, but pale blue, as if the stars beneath the ground had awakened. And in that moment, the plantation vanished from the world of men. Those who traveled that road after the thaw found only empty land, no house, no trees, just a perfect circle of black soil where nothing ever grew again. For 80 years, no map marked the Merrin property. Travelers passed through the valley without stopping, claiming compasses failed there, and horses refused to cross the blackened soil. In 1923, a team of surveyors rediscovered the site. What they found wasn't ruins, only the imprint of a house, the pattern of its foundations burned into the earth like a negative photograph. They took soil samples back to Columbus. The results showed traces of human DNA in every layer, woven through the clay like threads. 3 distinct genetic markers repeating endlessly, spiraling downward into the sediment. The scientists dismissed it as contamination. But one researcher, a woman named Dr. Hester Vaughn, couldn't let it go. She returned alone with a recorder and an old journal she had found in an antique shop, the one signed S. Merrin. Its pages ended mid-sentence, but the last line read, "If they wake again, it will not be for me." That night, her recordings captured something she didn't hear in person, a hum at 19 hertz, too low for the human ear but strong enough to shake the recorder itself. 3 pulses, perfectly synchronized. Dr. Vaughn began digging where the cellar once stood. Just beneath the surface, she found stone steps descending into darkness. The wood had rotted away, but the markings on the walls were untouched, as if the soil itself had preserved them. She described them in her notes, circular, continuous, as if drawn by multiple hands at once. They emit faint static when touched. She sent samples to the university, but they never arrived. The courier disappeared somewhere on the road between Athens and Columbus. Weeks later, Vaughn herself stopped responding to letters. Her colleagues found her car parked beside the excavation site, doors locked, keys still in the ignition. The only clue was her final field note, written on the back of a map. "They know we remember them. The ground is listening." In 1948, a new building rose on the same ground, funded quietly by the state. Officially, it was an agricultural research station. Unofficially, it was a containment facility. Locals called it the farm. Inside, soldiers and scientists studied what they called resonance fields, regions of energy that distorted sound and perception. Every night, the instruments recorded the same vibration Dr. Vaughn had captured decades earlier. Hertz 3 pulses, always. 3. Several staff reported dreams of children, whispering in a language they couldn't remember upon waking. One man described a vision of 3 shadows standing by his bed, each with Evelyn Merrin's face. He resigned the next morning. Within weeks, the project was shut down. The official cause, psychological contagion. The building was sealed, and the files were buried deeper than state archives allowed. Decades passed. The world changed. Highways cut through the valley. Suburbs grew around it. And then, in 1979, a construction crew digging for a gas pipeline struck something hard beneath the soil, stone carved with repeating patterns. When the foreman lifted a piece to inspect it, his hands began to bleed from hairline cuts, though no sharp edge touched him. The crew abandoned the project. The site was reclassified, fenced off, and labeled environmental hazard. Only one reporter tried to dig deeper. His name was Jonathan Hale. He published a single article titled "The Children Under Ohio." 2 weeks later, he vanished. But before he did, he left a note with his editor. "They've learned how to travel through memory. They don't need bodies anymore. You might think that's where the story ends, buried under red tape and superstition. But it didn't. Because in 2007, an anonymous file was uploaded to a government server by an unknown account named Isaiah 1841. It contained digitized scans of Silas Merrin's original journal, Dr. Vaughan's field notes and audio files labeled Triplet Resonance. Each recording carried the same tone, 19 hertz. But when slowed down, words emerged. A single voice layered in 3 frequencies saying, "We remember. Open the rest." Within a week of the upload, the server crashed. The IP trace led back to an abandoned church near the original Merrin site. Investigators found the building empty except for a new symbol etched into the altar, 3 circles intersecting. No fingerprints, no sign of life, just a faint hum still resonating in the wood. And if you play that hum loud enough, things start to move that shouldn't. When the file vanished from government servers, fragments of it spread across underground forums. Most dismissed it as a hoax, until sound engineers confirmed that the triplet resonance tone contained an audio pattern that shouldn't exist. Each pulse mirrored the micro-rhythm of a human heartbeat, but the intervals formed an impossible geometry, a pattern repeating inward instead of forward. Listeners reported identical dreams, 3 children standing in a flooded cornfield calling them by name. Some woke to find muddy footprints near their doors. Others lost entire hours from their nights. The phenomenon was nicknamed the Merrin effect. Universities quietly studied the recordings. They found that prolonged exposure changed neural timing, brief but measurable. It didn't harm anyone. It only made them remember things they'd never lived. Historians cross-checked those memories and found traces of real events erased from archives. It was as if the sound unlocked a shared recollection that had been waiting inside human minds all along. By 2011, private collectors began trading the surviving pages of Silas Merrin's journal. Most were fakes, but one appeared genuine, a sheet written in ink that never dried, still faintly warm to the touch. Its final paragraph read, "They do not die. They migrate through the mind." A linguist who examined it noticed the same phrase carved in the wood of the old church altar, now almost invisible under layers of varnish. When photographed under infrared light, new symbols appeared, arranged like a map. The pattern pointed toward the Hocking Hills, the same region where the first slaves had vanished from Merrin's estate in 1841. Explorers who went there found nothing but limestone caves, until one recorded an echo that didn't match her own voice. It spoke 3 words: not gone, remembered. News never reached mainstream outlets, but fragments leaked onto late-night forums and fringe podcasts. A few hosts claimed that the Merrin resonance was being used in advertising research, tones below human hearing meant to trigger trust, obedience, focus. Most of that talk was guesswork, but one recording from an old test facility proved real. The tone slowed 1,000 times, revealed whispering beneath the frequency: open, return, become. Psychologists studying auditory influence argued that the human brain might interpret subharmonics as suggestion. The Merrin sound wasn't language, it was permission, an old invitation disguised as noise. Then came the storm of 2020. A massive power failure hit southeastern Ohio. When grids returned online, surveillance drones recorded a ring of light in the forest. 3 concentric circles scorched into the trees, glowing for hours before fading to black. Soil samples again showed organic matter fused with metal. People living nearby reported a low hum rising from the ground at exactly 19 hertz. Radios caught fragments of children singing backward hymns. Within weeks, every device that had recorded the event failed. Circuits burned from the inside out. But one photograph survived, a frame showing faint outlines of 3 small figures standing within the circle, heads tilted toward the camera, as if watching whoever watched them. Tonight, the hum has returned. No one knows why. Perhaps memory itself is the bridge, the place where the Merrin Triplets still move, waiting for minds willing to listen. If you've stayed with this story this long, you've already felt it, the faint vibration behind your thoughts. That's how it begins, not as belief but as recognition. Some say that speaking their names aloud wakes them. Others say remembering them is enough. So I'll ask you to do something small, something symbolic. If you hear the hum between my words, Type this phrase twice in the comments. We remember, not for superstition, but to prove that memory still belongs to us, not to whatever borrowed it long ago. And if the lights flicker when you do, don't be afraid. It only means the story has found you. They say the land remembers. Beneath the Merrin fields, under the roots of old sycamores, lie the things no man was meant to find. A slave once uncovered an old map, 3 circular marks aligned like serpents' fangs. In the center, a phrase scratched into the hide. We were never born. We were awakened. No one knew what it meant. But the writing didn't match any known ink. When tested years later, scientists said the residue wasn't pigment. It was blood, old blood, iron-rich and still faintly warm. At night, the wind that passed through Merrin Farm carried a sound, like laughter and prayer woven into one. When the farmhouse was demolished in 1892, workers found 3 wooden jars sealed with pitch. They thought it was oil, but when one lid cracked open, the air hissed, as if something exhaled after years underground. Inside was nothing, just a smell of rain and iron. That same night, the earth trembled. Locals swore they heard small footsteps running across the fields. Scientists called it air compression. The elders called it the land remembering its children. After 1841, children born within 5 miles of Merrin Farm began dying without cause. Each one was found with the same faint mark, 3 circles joined by a single line, carved just behind the left ear. Dr. Fenwick recorded it in his notes before he vanished. They share one pulse, one silence, as if born from the same dream. The stones of the Merrin fields still bear that symbol. No matter how much it rains, those stones never darken. It's as if even the soil refuses to touch what was written there. A young journalist came to the site in 1927. He called it superstition. He said, "It's all folklore. I'll prove it." 3 days later, he was gone. His camera was recovered, but the film was blank, except for a few seconds of static and a child's faint laughter. Then another voice joined in. Then a third. Before the tape cut off, one whisper was caught beneath the static. "We're still here." No one has filmed there since. They claim the Merrin Farm no longer exists, that it was cleared and buried. But every October, satellite scans show a strange dark shape appearing on that land. Not a building, not a man. 3 small silhouettes standing side by side. When analysts try to zoom in, the image corrupts. A message flashes beneath the distortion. Subject protected, file restricted under 1841 Act. Protected by whom? And from what? In 1901, a government survey team discovered tunnels beneath the Merrin property. The walls were melted smooth, as if carved by heat, not tools. At the center, a chamber. 3 wooden masks, shaped like the faces of infants, were placed upon stone pedestals. Each mask emitted a slow, steady thump, like a heartbeat buried in time. The area was sealed. The report read only, "Artifacts, animate resonance, burial recommended." But no burial ever took place. Those masks remain in federal storage, growing colder every year. A diary was later found, written by the son of a slave who once worked the farm. He wrote that Merrin's father made a bargain. The words were crude, but the meaning was clear. He traded 3 lives for beauty and abundance. The land will feed forever. And it did. No drought, no famine ever touched Merrin soil again. But the price was not just blood, it was inheritance. The spirit of the bargain bound to every generation that carried that name. In 1943, Dr. Halverson studied the remaining Merrin descendants. He found something impossible, identical resonance patterns in their blood, a rhythm that pulsed 3 times, then paused. His report ended abruptly. Genetics cannot explain synchronized consciousness. 2 days later, he vanished. Only a single note was found in his office drawer. They came for the blood, but the blood came for them first. To this day, locals whisper of a ritual. Stand at the old Merrin gate at exactly 3:13 a.m. Say, "We were never born" 3 times. You'll hear children laughing behind you. If you turn around, You won't see them, but you'll notice your own reflection has vanished from the puddle at your feet. A YouTuber tried it once. His channel no longer exists, but fragments of his upload remain. A glitch of static and one child's voice, whispering, "You shouldn't have called us." Many say the Merrin story is fiction, but hidden inside the Ohio State Archives is one file still under federal seal, 18041A. Inside, a parchment reads, 3 bodies. No decay, breathing as one. Do not open. Signed, President Martin Van Buren. If that's true, it means the Merrin secret was never local. It was national. And if those bodies were breathing as one, then maybe the triplets never died. Maybe they simply waited. And every October, when the soil trembles beneath that cursed land, the earth whispers their name again. Merrin.